Welcome to the Women in Publishing Summit. I'm Alexa Bigworth, your host, and I love panels. I'm really glad to be bringing you a panel today talking about publishing and different routes to publishing. I love panels because I think we feed off of each other with our ideas, and as we get talking, things come to us that may not necessarily come to us in a one-on-one interview, and it's just a great opportunity for you to hear a bunch of different perspectives on this amazing world of publishing. I think if you haven't figured it out yet, there are so many ways to do this endeavor, and there's no one right path for anyone. It really depends, or one right path that everyone has to follow. It really depends on what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve with your publishing, whether you want to be a fiction or nonfiction writer, whether you want to be a New York Times bestseller, or you're publishing your grandmother's favorite stories. There are so many different ways to go. So today's panel is going to shed a little bit more light on it. A lot of people come knowing what self-publishing is. Maybe you've already self-published a book. Maybe you are well in the route of self-publishing. And today we just want to shed some light on some of the other options out there, particularly hybrid publishing, because it is newer and something that is pretty confusing to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And we will cover a little bit about traditional publishing. So welcome to my panel today. We have a great group of phenomenal women. We have Elizabeth Turnbull, Terry Ryder, Kate Steed, and Annalisa Parent. So thank you so much, ladies, for being here. And because I had a technical snafu, I usually read the bios, but today we are going to let each lady introduce themselves. So thank you for taking your time out for this panel. Elizabeth, you're up.
Yes, hi, I'm Elizabeth Turnbull. I am one of the partners and the senior editor at Light Messages Publishing. We are a small family-run press in Durham, North Carolina. We have two imprints. Under the Light Messages imprint, we do traditional publishing, and under the Torchflame Books imprint, we do hybrid publishing. And I think we're going to get into the details of what makes one different a little bit later.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Terry.
Hi. My publishing company is called Top Reads Publishing. I'm primarily a hybrid press in Southern California. And the other thing that I do occasionally, if a title doesn't fit into my catalog, then sometimes I will work with an author and help them self-publish. I do that less frequently because I am focused on my own titles quite a bit. It's a lot of work to do the hybrid publishing model. But sometimes there's a book that I feel just needs to get out there, and I'll help that author do that.
That's awesome. Kate.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kate from Old Mate Media, and we run a small publishing company, myself and my husband, and we primarily focus on children's books and helping authors design and publish and navigate the children's pathway. Awesome. So we do both, all types of hybrid and also author services.
Amazing. And then Annalisa, who does something not entirely different, but a different audience, unless you've changed since I spoke to you.
Hello, I'm Annalisa Parent. I am the CEO of Date with the Muse, and its two subsidiaries, The Writing Gym, which helps fiction authors to traditionally publish, and Laurel Elite Books, that helps expert entrepreneurs to publish their expert books. We are a hybrid publishing house. I'm also the award-winning author of Storytelling for Pantsers, How to Write and Revise Your Novel Without an Outline.
And it's a great book. I actually have it right here on my desk because I was reading through it the other day again. So, and actually, in addition to the Women in Publishing Summit and my self-publishing assist company, Write, Publish, Sell, I also have a hybrid publishing company, Cat Biggie Press, and for women's nonfiction, mostly self-help business books, types like that, inspirational stories, and then we have a children's hybrid press as well, Purple Butterfly Press. So this is a good mix of different routes, and Purple Butterfly Press, I would like to take the traditional route one day, but I am not there yet, and we'll talk about some of the reasons throughout this. Okay, we have a couple of people who are working with helping the traditional. So I think what the best thing to do at this point is to kind of just go through and have Elizabeth maybe explain about the traditional process, and then Terry, if you'll go on the. Now Terry does children's books too, but you're primarily adult books, right?
Yes, adult books, nonfiction, self-help, and some historical fiction.
Okay, so we'll go through that route, and then I'll catch up with Kate and Annalisa on what I'd like to hear from you two. So Elizabeth.
All right, yes, so the traditional imprint means basically that we operate on a smaller scale of what the industry has been doing for decades, centuries, right? The idea is that an author signs a contract with the publisher and gives over a set of rights to the manuscript to publish that, and in exchange receives royalties based on the sales of that book. Sometimes traditional presses give an advance. Fewer and fewer are doing that, and small presses rarely do. We do not, but we do offer pretty high royalty rate for a traditional press. Ours is 25% on net. So
that is high for traditional.
Yeah, it is high. But we were founded by self-published authors, right? Everybody in my family had done some work, and so we had a heart for that. What it means also, though, is following the traditional timeline to check all the boxes of the industry, right? So there are benchmarks that have to be met with a traditionally published manuscript, and what that means is it takes anywhere from 12 to 18 months to have your book published, and that is not practical for everybody, nor is it necessary or beneficial, which is why other options come into play. I think where traditional works really well is with books that have a mass market appeal, and that really do need to follow that, right? They need the trade reviews so that booksellers and librarians will pick them up. They need to get expert reviews. They need to get good, solid marketing. And a publisher can really afford to invest in the marketing when they are keeping more of the royalties, right? Because there's more money to work with in that scenario. So more traditional books tend to work well under that model, things like novels. We do well also with some religious nonfiction texts. So we do, under that imprint, typically literary fiction, mystery, political thriller, memoir, or nonfiction biography, and then also some religious nonfiction. We do, in our press, we do about 6 to 8 titles a year for that.
Great. So if you have, I'm assuming Elizabeth would be okay with this. We'll have all the contact information in there. But if you have questions about whether or not the traditional route is right for you, I think Annalisa could also answer these types of questions too. So I'm sure we could talk a lot more on that, but let's talk about hybrid publishing and what it means and why it's a good route for people. Terry.
Hi, thank you. I think that a lot of the traditional business practices of publishing apply in hybrid press. The main thing is that the author subsidizes some of the costs up front. So I think most traditional presses will not ask an author to participate in those costs, but a hybrid press will have the author pay different fees for perhaps design, book cover, some editing. The author will be responsible for those things. And then the hybrid press will pay a higher royalty than traditional presses. That's typically the difference. We still follow a model of traditional publishing with getting professional reviews. We follow a timeline, but it is more flexible in the hybrid scenario because we aren't as focused with some titles on those main reviews, the trade reviews. We still do a lot of marketing with regards to getting the book noticed by retailers, by libraries. We have distribution through a trade distributor So we do have that avenue that if you're self-publishing, then sometimes you don't have that if you're going through Amazon or Ingram Spark. So we do have a distributor, and that makes a big difference. That opens up a lot of marketing channels like NetGalley, lots of other retail and wholesalers become available using a distributor. I think that's one of the biggest advantages of using a hybrid press.
Yeah.
And there is a set of criteria that we at IBPA have considered to be essential for a hybrid press to follow. And that can be found on the IBPA website.
And
as a committee, we've worked on that quite a bit.
Yes. For those of you who are completely new to publishing, IBPA is the Independent Book Publishers Association. It's a great resource. It's heavily influenced towards the side of the publishers, but also authors who are self-publishing who want to learn the publishing industry. So it's a great resource to look into. Kate, does your company have distribution?
We don't have a specific distributor at the moment. Unfortunately, we're based in Australia.
Yep.
And in the Australian market, the biggest independent distributor just went out of business.
Oh, no.
Late last year. So we were setting up our contracts with them, and then they went out of business. So that space hasn't really been filled in Australia yet. And we have been focusing with our authors on Amazon as and on really sort of maximizing their presence on Amazon as their best initial distribution channel.
Yeah. I just wanted to highlight that. I wanted to ask to see, because I think that is one of the things, like in the best case scenario, you have the distribution, but not all hybrid presses have that. So, don't necessarily red X a company that you're looking at if they don't have a distribution agreement that they're working with, because sometimes you can, be very, very successful through other routes and not even need it. So again, it goes back to the questions of, or it goes back to the idea of making sure that you find the route and the publisher that are the most that work with you and do really well. So Kate, you are children's book publishers. So how many titles do you usually take a year, and what kind of process do they follow to join you on that endeavor?
Sure. We generally publish, we'll take about, not a lot of titles each year, so about 15. Which
that's a lot.
Some of them, well, some of them are our own. So we will publish some of our own. My husband writes his own children's books as well, and then some from other authors. And the scale of our involvement, and whether they publish under the Old Mate Media imprint or whether they publish under their own imprint, will come down to their own publishing goals and where they want to go. So that's generally. We will ask all authors to submit, and we will edit all books that come into our company as a starting point, and then basically work with them on their publishing timeline. So I know that this isn't as helpful for people, because everyone's, you kind of want a step-by-step guide, but we just find that each author is so different that it's really hard to say.
That's true.
This is the process that we're going to follow.
No, it's the same with us too. Like I say the same thing to people, because the process is going to vary so differently based on who their audience is and what they're trying to achieve as well. Even in children's books. So, all right. So Annalisa, so let me make sure I understand this properly. You help fiction authors traditionally publish, but then you're working with more like nonfiction, business books, textbooks, and hybrid publishing them through there. Okay. So I would love, this is really great, because I think you can give a really good, it's pretty clear. You're either writing a fiction book or you're writing a nonfiction business book, but what are some of the biggest differences that you see in the process, I would say, because there are a lot of authors who write both.
Absolutely. Yeah, and when we look at traditional publishers, we're really shooting for the big five. So these are fiction writers who are really looking to break into two things. One, the literary market, and two, what I call the author lifestyle. So they want many, many traditional publishing contracts. They're looking for those advances from the bigger houses. And, that's a difference. Elizabeth talked a little bit about what it looks like to publish with a small press where you may or may not get an advance, but you're a bigger partner typically in the production process and in the revenue process. When you shoot for one of the big five, that's not the case. So you don't get a lot of control. You don't get hardly any say, if you get any at all. But you may get a 5-figure advance or more, sometimes slightly less. So that's what traditional publishing looks like, sort of in the way that we think about traditional publishing, big T, big P, in the old style, versus, hybrid publishing, which I call the best of both worlds, because you get a lot of the control that you would have gotten in the self-publishing world. You get typically to be a partner in the process, and you're getting a greater revenue share, which you wouldn't necessarily get in all cases of traditional publishing.
That's a good point. Elizabeth, so go ahead. Did someone have something to add on there? No? Okay, sorry. Elizabeth, when an author comes to you, do they usually find you at one place and then you make the determination whether they're going through the traditional route or whether they're going to be the hybrid or self-publishing? Or do you have like two completely separate where they come to different organizations? And how's that process work?
Yeah, so we do have two completely separate websites for each imprint, but in general, I would say the vast majority of our manuscript submissions come through our main lightmessages.com website, just because it has a bigger footprint online. It's been around more years. And I think people initially think of submitting to a publisher under a more traditional way because the hybrid is still new. So they'll submit a manuscript. We will evaluate it. We have a form online that we ask everybody to fill out. So we're evaluating everything against as similar, as equitable of criteria as we can set up. And then we'll go through it. And often we know right away that it's not a good fit for us in general, overall. But when we think, okay, this is a really good book, I would love to do this, then we stop and we evaluate, will it do well under the traditional model? Does this have sort of a mass market appeal? Or is this more of a niche book where the author is going to have to be very heavily involved with every step of the process, no matter what we do on our end, and therefore should probably make more money with the royalties because they're going to be really heavily involved. Of course, I love my traditional authors to be heavily involved too, don't get me wrong. But I mean, sometimes, I know, for example, that this, like one of the books I'm working on right now, I did a literary novel for the author before, and now it's a religious nonfiction book, kind of exploring more deeply some of the themes from her novel, right? So I know that she got some really good trade reviews. I know that she's building a name for herself in that. And so I know that from us on the traditional press and from the slower timeline. The other might be a book about somebody in, we had a book about, it was called Don't Let Me Be the Oldest Mom in the PTA. It's a humor book, great. But that book really is selling well because that author is out there, right? She's talking to people, she's holding conferences, she's meeting with people, she's hand selling her book. And so we put her on the hybrid imprint. So people come to us from both ways, and our desire is to see the authors succeed because, as we remind them, no publisher makes money if you don't sell books.
Exactly. So and we're going to come back to that topic in a second. I would like to go through everybody, actually, now that we started talking about submission, and see, Terry, Kate and Annalisa, how the process for submission with yours too. And I think it's important. I mean, even if you're not thinking about submitting to one of these places, I think it's really important to see how different the submission process can be and how important it is to do your research on where you're trying to submit and what you're trying to do.
I'll jump in. Oh, do you want to go first, Suri?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So with our children's books, we generally ask authors to complete, we have a template that lays out their book that basically puts it all out in pages with their ideal illustrations, and we ask them to submit that along with some goals of where they want their book to go and how they want to distribute it and how they believe that that's going to happen. Gives us an idea of their platform and whether they have any marketing plans and ideas and things like that, because if we are going to take them on to be published under the Old Mate Media imprint, we want a partner in the process. And we find that most authors that submit that way may end up going through the we can guide them instead through the self-publishing process because they're not quite ready actually to be published under an imprint, and because they don't have a platform, they don't have an audience, they don't have a marketing plan, they're not there. So that's our process.
That's really good to know, and I'm sure this will become very apparent as we all go through here, but I think it's really, 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 really important for everybody listening to understand what Kate just said and even what Elizabeth just said, and breaking it down into realizing that just because you find a traditional publisher, or maybe not so much in the big five, but I think even more so with the big five, they look at your platform, what you have to offer, because they're taking a huge financial risk on you. But you, regardless of publishing way, you have to take on a lot of the burden of finding your platform, getting out there and marketing and all those kinds of things. So Terry, for you.
In fact, that's one of the key factors in what books I choose to publish under my imprint. And that's why I also will do the author services to help someone produce a beautiful book and publish themselves. They may not be quite ready. But my most successful books are, of course, everyone will agree, when the author is participating in their own promotions and they're out there selling their books, and they have a platform, and they are speaking at places that they've already got an audience that they've been working with, and or they're actively building one. If I see someone who's really putting forth the effort to do that, then that is that's a factor. When I get submissions, they're usually word of mouth. And I will first do a read through of the first 30 pages. If it grabs me, I'm going to read the whole thing. And then my process is that I will send it to one or two of my editors and get their take on it. So I know what I like, but I like to get a cross section of what my editors, trusted editors, they've done a good job for me, what they think. If they think the book has legs, if they feel, they'll also give me an evaluation of what work it needs. And that's always a factor too. It's rare to get a book that's ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's usually a few rounds of editing, or maybe light editing, sometimes developmental. But if the book feels right for me, it's a lot of gut instinct. I think we all agree with that too. It's like, what do you think? Is this going to sell? Do I like the book? Do I like the book? Do I want this in my catalog? And when you get one that you have that feeling about, it's like, yeah, this is a good one. And that makes it fun. I think that's really important too. I always want the author to have fun in this process.
Annalisa.
Yeah, this is really interesting, Alexa, because I think that one of the things that we're tapping into here as we all talk about the way that we accept submissions is what is the purpose of a book?
Mm-hmm.
And all books have a different purpose. The purpose of a picture book writer is very different from the people who are coming to Laurel Elite Books. We look at a book as a scaling tool for a business. So while it is technically a book by definition, it's also really a tool for the entrepreneur, for the CEO, for the small business owner to get their message out into the world and find their ideal client. Now, that's a very different concept than a picture book writer, for example.
Right.
And what their purpose is. So the way that we accept submissions, about 50% of the people who come to us say, I've got an idea, I have no idea how to write a book, and I'm very busy. And so we help them to get that book out and run a business at the same time. The other 50% say, I slopped together some blog entries, I put it up on Amazon and no one's buying it, how come? And so we help them to, we take them from idea to sold. Really, the objective here is to scale a business, to grow a business, to really communicate a message to an ideal client. So we're really taking that purpose into account, and that's how we're accepting the people that we work with.
You raised such excellent points, and I think that really is, as you listen to this, take a step back and say, what is it that you're writing a book for? And we do have a lot of entrepreneurs in this audience who are looking to build their business with the book. So in those cases, a lot of what we just talked about is kind of like it's a different approach, because they don't necessarily have to have thousands of readers out there. They don't necessarily have to have big time editorial reviews. They just have to have their business market and, utilize it that way. So when you're looking for the right publishing route, when you're looking for the right publisher, when you're looking for all of these things, I mean, anybody could tell you that one way is the wrong way, but it really depends. If they are publishing a fiction novel, the process is so different and the expectations are so different than someone who is publishing their cookbook for vegans. So it's really, really important to consider that. I kind of would like to ask the question of maybe like, what would be your best advice to someone on as they're trying to figure out what route to take? Like, what would you advise? We've touched on it a little bit, but to really get into asking the question of, here's my manuscript. Should I go the agent publisher route? Can I do this on my own? Do you have any advice? And we'll go backwards this time to let Annalisa jump out there first. Like, what's your advice when someone comes to you and asks which route to take?
Yeah, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but it's really all about your purpose. What are your goals? What do you want to do with your book? And, I think it was you, Alexa, who was talking about, publishing your grandma's stories. That's a very different objective than scaling a business, than having a picture book that you're then able to speak in elementary schools about. So there's no one size fits all when it comes to publishing. We're in a great era right now where there are so many options on how to get your book out so that you really can choose. 150 years ago, there was really only one way to go, and you either got picked or you didn't. And today, there's so much more democracy and so many more options on how you can get your message out into the world. Take advantage of those. So I think really, if I have one advice, well, it's twofold. One, know what your purpose is and follow that purpose, but also put in the research to find out what's going to be the very best option for you.
I think unless somebody has something that's completely different from that, I think we would probably all say that that's pretty much it right there. Yeah. So I'd like to start back on a different question on that then. And that is, okay, so you've decided self-publishing assist or hybrid publishing is the right way to go for me. There's a lot of negativity out there about using hybrid publishers, a lot. So I think what would be most useful for our time now is to kind of discuss why that negativity exists, the difference maybe between a hybrid and a, what's the word? I just
Vanity.
Vanity Press. Thank you. It's just like
For author services.
gone. A Vanity Press, and then maybe some red flags. And I know, Terry, you know a lot of information on this topic, so I'm going to end with you so that you can recap everything that anybody else missed.
I'll fill it in.
I'll start with Kate actually on this one. If you, from the children's book perspective, red flags people can look for, and where they might realize, okay, this is not a good fit.
Sure. Well, if you're going to work with a hybrid press, part of the benefits is that you will have some control and be an active participant in the publication process. So if you're putting forward a story and the publisher says, oh, yep, that's great, here's a package, and this includes this many illustrations, and we will just give you one illustrator to work with, and we'll, and that's it, then don't, you want to have some options. You want to be able to work with the illustrators. You want to be able to be involved. And you want to be able to really connect with the illustrators, just be able to really work with them. Probably you're not going to be talking to the illustrators directly, because part of the advantages of working with the press is that they will take care of that for you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really the one-size-fits-all packages that I think are the red flags. If it sounds too good to be true, then it generally is. And and the ones where they immediately reply, really, oftentimes people will get an email out of the blue that says, we've found you and we think that your book is great. And that's just always, or congratulations, you've been accepted to publish straight away as soon as you submit your manuscript with a reply email. That sort of stuff is never a good sign.
Or you must sign this contract by tomorrow, or we'll never have this offer available for you again.
That's
Seriously, walk quickly. Yeah. Elizabeth, what would you like to add to this?
Yeah, I think it might be helpful for some of the authors just getting started out there just to understand there are really three good, legitimate routes to publishing. One is the traditional route, which of course within that is many variations, big five, small press, medium press, etc. There's the hybrid route, which we've talked about, which really is a publisher who does all of the things that other publishers do, but they have input and back financial investment from the author up front, right? The author is helping to subsidize that. And with that, I do want to put an asterisk and say that many traditional presses do that too, behind doors, and they're not upfront with it, which is why I like the hybrid model, because it's honest. But then there is also the self-publishing route and the author services model, right? Who is not a publisher, but they are somebody who is providing consulting and expertise and assistance to authors. And I think that none of those should have a negative stigma to them. Mm-hmm. What matters at the end to me is, does your book meet what the industry says are the standards for a professionally published book? And that ties directly into a plug that I'm going to give for IBPA, right? We wrote the industry standards for the professionally published book, and it's on our website. Yeah. And whether you do it yourself or with a hybrid publisher or traditional, you should print that checklist off. It's free, and make sure that your book checks all those marks. And if it doesn't, you're not ready yet. Mm-hmm. And the same thing for hybrid publishers. I would say, look at the hybrid standards checklist, which is available also on the website. And as you're interviewing publishers and talking to them, find out if they check all of the boxes. If they do, then they are a hybrid publisher. If they don't check all of them, they may be on the route to being a hybrid publisher. It doesn't mean you can't work with them. It just means that you need to make sure that you understand what you're getting into, and that you understand what they can offer you and what they can't offer you. And I think that's where the industry tends to give a bad rap to the non-traditional route. And I don't want to take a lot of time on this, but I think part of it is, right, the traditional publishers are struggling, and so they see these other models as a threat, and it's easier to push them to the side and to marginalize them than it is to learn from them.
Right.
So, when the gatekeepers are telling you that the alternative route isn't good or safe, you should consider who's telling you that. But that being said, I think the other thing is that hybrid publishers tend to, or not, but many publishers or many vanity presses out there tend to take advantage of authors, and then they give the legitimate people a bad rap. So what I would really say is do your homework and rely on professional organizations to help guide you through the process.
Yeah. Annalisa, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, so those are really great tips, Elizabeth, and thank you to the IBPA for putting together those standards. They're very helpful. And the other thing is that there are all kinds of price points when it comes to hybrid publishing, and a price point isn't necessarily a red flag, but it is an invitation to know what it is that you're getting for any given price point, and more importantly, why that matters for you. So I don't know what it is, in the genres that you're publishing, but one of the fallacies that I see a lot in the business world is the promise of an Amazon bestseller. And that looks really great, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you've sold books. And that's the lie there. It can mean that you sold books, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. And so know what it is that you're getting and why it matters, how it can help you, and is it aligned with what your goals are? If you want that gold star to hang on your wall to call yourself an Amazon bestseller, then that's fine for that to be a priority for you. But if your real goal is to sell, 500,000 books, then that may or may not be a match there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Terry, you are also on the IBPA committee developing these standards. So bring it on home for us.
You guys all did a great job of covering the top issues, and some of us call the vanity presses black boxes, because you'll get in at a certain package level and they'll say they're going to do all of these, and then they'll try to upsell you. So if you're in that tragic loop of, well, we could do more with your book if we do this, and it's all. If it feels salesy, then that's kind of a red flag. Yeah. One of the things with publishers, such as we all are, is that you'll get personal service. So my authors work directly with me, and then we will handpick editors to work with them. And they will work with that same editor through the process, or a layout artist, or a cover designer. They're going to get the hand-holding service by the same individual. And a lot of times with the larger vanity presses, whoever is working that day on your project, there may be a trail. There may be several people working on your project, and there's a little bit of a disconnect with that type of just a lack of continuity in the project. And if there's a project manager, that's always great, because they're going to oversee the whole project. They're going to know you as an author, and they're going to know what your individual needs are, and they're going to help you manage your expectations. That's another big point, I think. How many books do you want to sell? Where do you want to sell? How much do you want to participate? And really, what's your budget? You have to kind of consider that, and if their budget is at one place, then manage the expectations for what they can get for that.
Yeah.
And a huge shout out to IBPA. There's so many great resources on their website for free. You don't even have to join, and familiarize yourself with the hybrid checklist and the standards checklist. The standards checklist is amazing, and that is essential for every person, every author who really has an intent of producing a quality book.
Self-publishers included, and
absolutely,
I think even more so for self-publishers, because what I see happen sometimes is that people will self-publish their book, and it's a good cover. It's a nice looking cover, but maybe it doesn't have all the elements that it should have on the back of the cover, like the price and the genre and all these kinds of things that library and bookstores look for. And then they pay hundreds of dollars to submit their books to awards programs all over the place, and they have no awards because their book is a good book, but it's not laid out right. It doesn't look right. The cover's not right. So to Terry's point, like, even if you're doing this on your own, one, unless you really want to learn to be, this is my big thing, unless you really want to learn to be a publisher, you should probably find a publisher, whether it's a self-publishing assist company or a publisher.
Absolutely.
Or unless you're just, or unless you're just publishing a passion project that you don't care if anyone ever buys or if it ever sells or if it ever wins awards, or that next caveat is, if you are an entrepreneur that's writing a book for your clients, for speaking engagements and things like that, and none of that other stuff matters, then self-publishing is a great route. So again, as Annalisa said, as we've all said, like, you have to first consider what you are trying to achieve. Hopefully this panel has given you a lot to think about in terms of which route to go. I think all of us are willing to answer questions, and if All Access Pass members can engage with us in the Facebook group. I want to give the opportunity. First of all, I do want to say that we were supposed to have one additional speaker today, Gail Woodward of Dudley Court Press. And I do want to, before I ask everyone to give their final 1 or 2 or 3 tips to our listeners today, and they can be anything. They can be about preparing your manuscript, about how to approach an agent, about how to approach a publisher, whatever it is that you feel is the most important thing you want people to know. Gail did send over her tips, so I'm going to read those quickly, and then we will go through the list here. Okay, so Gail says, and again from Dudley Court Press, she says, my tips are these: be clear about why you are writing your book. So she's right in there with us. She would have been nodding her head along. Be clear about who you are writing for, which is not something that we touched a lot on, but very, very important for many reasons. Who's your target audience? And then be clear about whether amateur or professional publishing is the right path for you. You can self-publish to professional standards, by the way, she says. It's like she heard this conversation.
No.
And then she finalizes it with start marketing now and keep marketing for as long as you want to sell your book, which is a very good point.
Forever.
Yes, marketing does not end at publication. Okay, Elizabeth.
I would say it's never too early to start building your platform. That's one of the big things that all publishers look at. And it doesn't mean that you have to have 1 million followers on Instagram, but it means that you have to show an understanding of what it's going to take to sell your book and start proving that you're capable to build an audience. The other thing I would say is craft a good pitch for your book. Try to get a good short description and synopsis so that it's easy for a publisher to understand what your book is about. And then the third one I would say is do your research, right? Make sure that a press is a good fit for you, because it does take time to submit properly. And I like to joke and say I'm a midwife for books. And so, you wouldn't just turn your baby over to anybody, right? So do some research and make sure that it's a good fit so that the relationship will be positive for all.
Very good points. Thank you. Terry.
I'm going to go to the heart of design. That's how I came into the publishing business. And the design of your book is essential. I agree with Elizabeth. All of that is super important. And because design is my favorite part, I really want to emphasize how important it is to have a great cover and to have it fit your market, have it fit your genre, and look at other books in your genre and have it match or have it look like it belongs in the same shelf. Work with a professional book designer, not a graphic designer. Graphic designers are great, but book design is very specific. The interior design is very important, and there's a specific way to do an interior book design. Most of us follow the Chicago Manual of Style, which specifically tells you how to do it, along with the IBPA checklist. And one thing that's really overlooked, I think, is the copyright page. That is essential to have all of the pertinent information on your copyright page, especially if you're marketing to libraries. You need to have the proper information so the librarians know where to put it on their shelves.
That's right.
And in their catalog. And I think that also the spine is important, to have the spine and the back cover designed properly. And of course, edit your book, proofread it a million times if you have to. just that you have to do that.
Thank you. Kate?
Sure. All really, really good tips already. I would say a couple of things. One, think about whether you want to invest money or time in your project. So a lot of first-time authors really like to take the DIY approach, and it's not really for us to sit there and say that that's not okay, because as a first-time author, you're starting out and you've got to work out what's best for you. But for example, in the children's space, if you want to self-publish and you want to design your own book, design is not simple, and then you're going to need to invest a lot of time in learning to use InDesign really well, because otherwise your book will look terrible. And it will immediately just disadvantage you in so many ways. So, if you want to go down a DIY route, then be prepared to invest in your own learning and the time to get your skills to a fantastic level. And if you hear that and you think that sounds absolutely terrible, then that's when you need to use professionals who will do that for you. And that's when you need to invest the money for them to do that. So that's the first thing. And the other thing I would say is to just, especially with children's books, think outside of the box. Don't think that you have to be in Barnes & Noble or even selling really well on Amazon to do well. One of our authors is a pensioner in the UK, and we published his book, and he is a singer has a lounge show in a hotel in Torquay, and he sells the books at his show. And so we print them out through Ingram Spark for him, get them sent off to him, and he has sold thousands of books.
Wow, that's
through
cool.
his show. Yes, you wouldn't expect it. He's a nearly computer illiterate pensioner, but he has a great little book. We've produced it really well, and he sells it directly. So think about where you can reach your readers, and don't be afraid to go think outside of bookstores and Amazon.
Absolutely.
So I would say you're not alone, and you don't have to be alone by nature. So reach out if you're not a professional book designer, interior, exterior. If you don't know how to list with the Library of Congress, if you're listing in the United States, reach out for the help that you need so that you can have the best quality book possible. Do the best job for yourself, because your name is going on that book and it's a representation of you. Do the very best job that you can.
I agree. All right. These are excellent tips. Thank you so much, ladies. This was a great interview. I'm sure we could have gone on for a very long time because there's so much to know about this topic. Thank you for your time. All your information will be here so we can share with everyone who wants to reach out to you. And have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Alexa.
Thank you.